really I want to thank Todd Trepanier. Todd is the Assistant Secretary of the Regions and the Principal Engineer for WashDOT. And he's actually on vacation right now, enjoying time with his family, and we're taking away some of that time. But that's how much we appreciate Todd and his advocacy work and just the work you do at WashDOT every single day. So I asked Todd to give us kind of an overview, a state of the system. You've heard kind of from some of the different regions and what's going on. So Todd, why don't you take it away so we can get you back to your family.
Thanks, Billy. And first off, can you all hear me? Because yeah, I'm in a location where I'm not quite sure my connection strength.
We got you. Good.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for this opportunity. I wish I could be there in person, but I am a schedule conflict, we'll call it that. I'm away, but I never want to pass up this opportunity to meet with all of you and talk about transportation. And as you've seen from this agenda, remarkably what you put together, Billy, this has been quite a rich day. I'm going to jump into a presentation here where much of it might be kind of a review for some of you, but I think some of this you can't see it too often. But definitely within this presentation, there are a few takeaway things that I think you're going to really be glad that you were here and spent this time to see this. Now my challenge is to share my screen. So hang on with that. I always have Noella's backup if I can't pull this off. Okay, are you seeing this in full screen?
Yeah, sure.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Okay, I want to start with this beautiful looking picture. I think many of you have seen this a number of times, but I want to just comment on it with kind of a new thought process. It wasn't that long ago, as you can recall, we would show this and we would be scratching our heads about how are we going to deal with this roughly $3 billion increase in the capital program expenditures above anything that we've ever delivered before. But one of the things that's really important as you look at this now that I want you to understand, we have hit the top of that mountain. So this huge climb of getting to this $6 billion program size, we are now at the summit. We are starting down the back side of this. We took was a lot of work with us in the consult community to get there, but the capital program and all the funding packages that have went into it, it is pretty much now going down this back hill slide. There's still going to be a lot of money that's expended, but it's not really going to be expended in trying to climb the mountain. It's finishing up with the contracting industry, and you will see more and more of a focus going on trying to work with the contracting industry to get good and smart bids on all of this. And again, here's another slide to just kind of show the point of this. This is the preliminary engineering dollars that are in the capital program from the past bienniums, the current bienniums, and 2 bienniums ahead. You can see we have met the peak of that, and we are now at the decline in our capital program for our design work. So kind of keep that in mind. Now I'm going to transition to something I think that you all know, but it's important to kind of remind ourselves of what the calendar looks like for building a budget. So right now we're sitting at the point where WashDOT as an agency is developing a budget that we need to have done at around the September timeframe to hand that off to the governor's office so that the governor's office can hand a budget to the legislature in December. This is a long session. So they will go through this. And so you're looking at the May timeframe where we come out with actually new money. So this is a critical time right now as we put together the agency's thoughts about where should transportation investment go and what is the state of the dollars that are being spent. A starting point for all of this is to look at where we ended last session. So you always go through the short session where there's a supplemental budget opportunity to where they can tweak things. And again, as you all know, and I'm going to show the next slide, there are a number of funding packages that make up the transportation budget. And the legislature has an incredibly difficult job as they're in session trying to balance all those needs. What have you heard all afternoon? Just needs. Everyone talking about, we need this need. Let's move this money. How about this need? It's all around us. How's the legislature supposed to deal with that? Well, they walked through the 24 session, gave us a supplemental budget with much work and much expectation, but as good as they could do, these budgets go into the red in the future bienniums. This is kind of a difficult chart to see, but I want to put it up there just to kind of show the magnitude of it. On the left side are all these account types that I'm talking about, which are the revenue sources that go in to make up WashDOT's budget. All those red numbers that you see dotted across those future bienniums are where those accounts go in the red. You can see it's really only the current biennium that is barely balanced. And so the legislature is faced with all of these conversations that we've had here today, but they're faced with revenue sources that can't even cover what was expected for them to cover if you just look 2 years out. So not only is the legislature going to have to deal with everything that I'm going to mention here in the rest of this presentation, they have to deal with the fact that the stuff that's already planned has insufficient funding. Okay, so here we go. This is where we start getting into some meat. As again, you are all in this with us. You bleed transportation needs. You've heard it here this morning. It is everywhere. How do you organize this into any sort of logical points and ask? Well, we wrestle with this at the agency, and we have come down to really there are 5. Get that, 5 specific points of critical funding needs. That's operation and maintenance, safety, preservation, fish passage, and ferries. And I'm going to dwell on each one of these for a minute, and I'm going to tell you what we believe is the critical funding ask at this point in time. So operations and maintenance. Again, you've heard a lot about it today. A lot of what you heard was right on point. This is a report card. I think you've probably seen it in past presentations, but I think all these presentations are going to be given to you by the Good Roads Association. You might want to look at this chart and dwell on it just a little bit. It is a very important chart that shows all of the maintenance operation and maintenance activities that take place with that part of our agency. And on this is a scoring on how much the funding is supposed to give you and how much the funding actually does give you. So the middle line is actually what some people believe the funding was supplied to supply that level of work. Now just look at, I just got to dwell on one. It's 2A2 culvert maintenance. The funding level that is expected to be supplied is to grade that at an F. At an F. That's the funding level. And the funding level that was achieved, which is over on the right-hand side, is an F. Every place that you see the light green in the left-hand column is a place to where we believe by our assessment, you need to have a good state of repair. And if it's light green, it means the funding level supplied for that is not even close to being met. And if you move to the right-hand column, if the dark green shows even with that acceptance of what we're actually funded for, it was not enough money to actually achieve it. So I don't need to, again, talk more and more details about the importance of operations and maintenance to our system. Here is the real takeaway. The belief is right now, at this point in time, operations and maintenance needs $310 to $350 million added to its existing dollar amount starting next biennium and ongoing every single biennium. That can't be a one-time shot in the arm. So the maintenance and operations part of our budget needs to be increased by $310 to $350 million, and it needs to happen right now. And if it's not done, this is what's, again, you all know it, but we could do presentations on any one of these bullets. I'm not sure we have given you a full presentation on just how many of our facilities are being closed on any given week because asbestos is being found in them. If I was to put together a road trip to take you to facilities that we're expecting our operations and maintenance people to work out of, you would be appalled. We are expecting them to work out of facilities that are so subpar and so substandard is essentially embarrassing. The bullet at the top right, we have traffic management centers all over in our 6 regions that basically are the hub of our communication center to be able to manage the highway. Much of the infrastructure, the computer infrastructure that's put into those TMCs was done with one-time monies or with grants, and all of those type of components are now aging themselves out. We're about to lose our ability to have our traffic management centers. It goes on and on. Our radio system, the increase in just what it costs to manage land. Here's just a slide that says, why we really want to fund it correctly. I don't need to tell this group any more details on that. So just remember those numbers that are needed for operations and maintenance. Now jump to safety. You've heard it all afternoon. People have been talking about safety. Chris just did a great job too of talking about safety as well, but I'm going to hit on it again. Here it is. You've seen these numbers, but really focus on them for a moment. Look back to 2014. 2014, we only had 462 traffic deaths. Compare that to the most recent number of 810. We went from 462 to 810. This is just unacceptable. You've heard in presentations, the societal cost of this is $20 billion a year. What needs to happen here? It's such a big issue. How do you wrap your hands around it? Well, we have an idea how to wrap your hands around it. In 10 years, it needs over $2 billion. But let's just talk about the next biennium, the biennium that is going to be planned by the legislature this session. The need should be communicated at $475 million. And I'm going to show you how that breaks down and why. Essentially, this is happening across the entire nation, this safety issue. And so there is a lot of thought that's going into it. And it is recognizing that there needs to be a safe system approach. WashDOT and Departments of Transportation are only a portion of that. This is a holistic issue. We know from our standpoint of what we should be the experts in that we can do this. We have safety enhancements such as roundabouts and J-turns. We are putting these in place with the small amount of modest money that we have, where these type of features save lives. These save serious injuries. So we know what needs to be done at a number of these locations that are causing these safety numbers. What is missing is the money. We also have recognized, as they have across the entire country, that locations where state routes also double as the main street going through a community is where you see a high amount of your fatalities and high injuries. So in our state, that's about 1,100 miles. There's about 1,100 miles of our state system's roads that aren't just a state highway, they're also the community road. So you've got a fast moving road system through essentially a urbanized center. And this is where a number of our fatalities and injuries are occurring. So as we look at that number of 475 million, the breakout that we believe is smart to do is 300 of it would go towards those specific 1,100 miles. Those specific 1,100 miles where the state highway is also doubling as the community's highway through their community. But we can't just focus on population centers. So out in the more rural areas where it's very important that you have guardrails in place, that you have striping in place, they have these intersections improvements that I was talking about, whether it's roundabouts or J-turns, $150 million per biennium is a good targeted amount there. And again, this group with Billy that's sitting there in the room, I can see him in the picture there, very much interested. 25 million per biennium needs to go in safety enhancements for our work zones. Now let's transition to preservation. And you notice I put operations and maintenance, and then I put safety, and then I put preservation. Because as I've talked to you in previous times when you've tolerated me to be at your meetings, there's been complete confusion on the difference between maintenance and preservation. And you've heard it again sometimes today, so I was very pleased how this was broke out. They're two specifically different things. You've all seen this green chart, probably to the point to where it all makes you ill because it's so big. How do you tackle it? You heard from Chris the amount of surface pavements that are in bad shape. You talked about double retrofits. So essentially what we're talking about right now in the preservation side, not the operations and maintenance, already talked about that at a $300+ million need per biennium starting next biennium. Preservation, to wrap our hands around it, needs an investment of $500 to $600 million. That is what it needs. It needs to start in 25, 27. And the condition of these highways and these roads are getting in such a state, this needs to happen. And I'm going to show a couple pictures here, even though I'm preaching to those that that speak to this all the time on our behalf. But we're beyond this reaching the critical point. And you see there at the bottom what is happening. If you live in the Olympia area, you know the Tacoma Narrows has had emergency closures just not that many months ago because the deck there is falling apart. Oh, one other thing that I want to quickly add here before I forget it. Brian White took you out on a tour of the Vantage Bridge, and he gave an excellent presentation on that as we started this meeting out. That, if you remember, the price tag of that was over $80 million. I can remember when we were trying to move that project forward and obtain the secured funding for it, it was $40 million. So this is the type of increased cost that is happening to these projects when we're not able to fund them at the time that we need to fund them. You can see on I-5 down in the Vancouver area, we have rough road signs. On interstate, it is just becoming absolutely ridiculous. The preservation needs just go on and on. Again, you've seen these charts before, so I'm gonna go by them fast. I'm just gonna dwell a little bit more on these bridges. This is the Carbon River Bridge. This is over 100 years old. It has very low use, but it is part of the state system. Because the funding levels being so short in preservation, this bridge has had very, very limited work on it, and it is on that curve now to the point to where I'm not sure what the outcome of this bridge is going to be. I'm not going to be surprised here very shortly, and you shouldn't be surprised where you're going to see load ratings on this bridge and not that many years out, unless money is put into preservation that can go towards something like this structure, this bridge will be totally closed. How is that going to work when it is the only access, public access to ownerships that are on the other side of this bridge? Chris did a great job of showing you a series of bridges out on SR 153. I'm just going to dwell on another corridor here for a moment because there's 5 bridges in this part of the state on this corridor that I'm sure you might have seen this in other presentations. 5 bridges ranging in age from 53 years to 98 years old. That Carbon River was over 100. These bridges need work of the number there, $300 million in bridge work. I'm telling you, and we're telling everyone, unless this 500 and 600 goes into preservation starting right now, you're going to start to see closures of highways like we've never experienced before. And let me also say in those slides that I moved back quickly, if we start with a type of a number, 5 to 600 million, which is anything bigger than that is probably unrealistic. It is going to take years and years and years to get out of this. So whoever you get a chance to talk to, get them to understand that this system has been ignored so long that any shot in the arm that the legislature is able to find the funding for, and again, please have sympathy for them. Remember that slide that I showed of all the different programs and how they're in the red. Where are they supposed to obtain the money? But even if they do find the money and put it in here for these investments, it can't be climbed out of in 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, or even 6 years. It will take a decade of investment levels of what I'm describing here in this presentation before we will start getting out of the situation of bridges like these impacting our ability to travel and our economy of the state. Emergency work. So far, emergency work is interesting because it hits operations and maintenance, and I did not have a slide there, but I have a slide under preservation. It hits preservation as well. The unexpected preservations that have hit this biennium so far. Now I want everyone to think about it. We also mentioned earlier in this presentation fires. There are fires going in across this state right now. I have fires that are impacting state routes in Chris's region, North Central. I have fires that are impacting routes in Eastern region, fires that are impacting routes in South Central region. All of those impacts are taking resources away from our operations and maintenance budget. Not only is it taking money to be able to assist with those fires, but it's taking our workforce away from the operations and maintenance activities that they would normally be doing to go assist with helping deal with those fires. So the emergent amount of issues that are happening, and with our budget size, it is devastating to us. So these needs are absolutely mandatory. Next one, fish barrier removal. I think you're all very much aware of it. I've seen that it was in your survey. You're all aware that the state of Washington is bound by court action to deal with these culverts. Where the budget comes from, where the money comes from, you've seen in the surveys what some people think. The bottom line is this is required by the court system to be done. Details and requirements that are laid out here in these books that are expected to be met by those court actions. The funds so far that have been dedicated to this program is approximately $4 billion, but look at the black number at the top. In addition to the other numbers that I've already mentioned to you, the Fish Passage Program needs an additional $5 billion. $5 billion to be able to get to the point to meet these type of expectations that are outlined by this court ruling. That is not money that's been allocated to date. This is the legislature, no matter where they find it, they need to find $5 billion to be able to keep up with, again, the legal requirements of the state of Washington to deal with these fish barriers. The ferry system, there's been some discussion on this today as well. The ferry system, as was mentioned, the long range plan, this is a key part of our transportation system. It's been identified 5 years ago. It should have 26 vessels so that 19 can be operated at any one time. It's trying to operate with only 15 boats at any one time right now, and the boats that it has are being aged out. I'm not the expert on ferries. If this Good Roads so much would like to understand more details, I would be inclined to invite someone from the ferries that can speak to all this stuff in detail. If you want to know more of the actual minutia and what they face, but it is monumental of what they're doing, and the successes that they're having are amazing. But what they have in front of them is absolutely difficult to deal with, and what the ferry system needs overall is another $5 to $5.5 billion in 25-27. Next biennium, they need $315 million. So I've clicked through the 5 specific critical funding needs that we believe that needs to be put forward in addition to funding all the activities that we're currently doing. These are the types of things that we're attempting to communicate on that calendar timeline that I was showing you. You've seen the difficulty the legislature is going to have dealing with this because of where the funding stands with the existing programs. And I hope that we all have great support and sympathy for the legislature as the individuals that I talk to recognize this importance. Their issue is look at the amount of money that needs to be found. But squarely, we tried to take what was a huge, difficult issue and boil it down to 5 specific areas and actually set dollar amounts of what needs to go into those in addition to the current budget amounts in this next biennium. And lastly here, because it's so near and dear to my heart, I always throw up our strategic plan that we have here at the agency, the values or the light writing that is around the outside, and that one of safety. That value is safety is more important to me than any of them. And now flashback to what we were talking about here. We're talking about 810 deaths. We're talking about how dangerous it is to be in our work zones these days. We're talking about a safe system approach to deal with this, not only for the general traveling public, but again for our construction workers. This needs our attention, and it needs more than just being talked about as a value. It needs money put into it. And there is an idea here on how much money needs to go into a safety program so that it is sustainable and workable, and we can actually have this value and keep our people safe. And with that, I will stop and see if there's any questions. I'm not hearing anything. So if someone's speaking, somehow I've lost.
Oh, there, Noel muted us. Great presentation as always, Todd. We jam-packed a lot of stuff into just over 2 hours today, so we will make sure that we get these presentations out to folks. If anybody does anybody have a question for Todd?
What's the sum of those five different ones?
I counted up about 15 to $20 billion over the next 10 years, somewhere in that range.
Todd, you have it some? The
I don't
five.
know. Yep. Just you have to sum up there yourself, Vic. I don't have them summed on the top of my head of what each biennium one amounts to.
God really needs you to work on being a little more blunt, please.
Well, again, I find it very encouraging because, again, as you know, I've worked on this for decades, along with most of you for a number of those years. It's a difficult topic, but I'm very encouraged that we've actually been able to break this down into these 5 specific areas. And within these 5 specific areas, we actually have a dollar amount that we can talk about is the dollar amount that we should be asking the legislature to invest in this next biennium. And then some of those had 10-year numbers, but they also had a number of what really needs to be looked for in the 25-27 biennium. And again, I always like to recognize the legislature has a difficult issue. They have a lot of transportation revenue accounts they have to deal with, and none of them are healthy. And they have to deal with that and still deal with these huge large numbers. It's very, very difficult. So I've always want to support them in anything they need so that they can understand this. And I think us giving them clear idea, you heard earlier, we need priorities. Well, here, there's 5 priorities, and associated with each of those priorities is a dollar amount. And if you look at those things, they all hit on the points that are very much acknowledged as what we need to be focusing on so that we have a strong transportation system for our people in a safe way and for the economy. There's my soapbox, Billy.
Well, it gives us the tools we're gonna need for a long session to try to get something done for everybody here and associated, so. Thank you.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I love the clarity of it, you know, you summed it up very nicely to those 5 categories and being able to have a dollar figure and lay that out. I know there's a lot more to that presentation that we could have went deeper into the weeds on, and I'm sure you've got other stuff that if we have specific questions on different things too, we will come to you for maybe a more detailed answer.
Thanks, Bill. And one last plug, and I know this one is always hard, and even within my own agency, my own people that I talk to, try not to look at one of those 5 as a source for one of the ones that might be near and dear to your heart. We can't cannibalize ourselves. We need all 5. We need all 5. You can't shortchange one in hopes of getting one of the others. It is all 5.
Yeah. Good reminder. Great reminder. We'll get back to that family of yours. Have some fun. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Todd.